Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our viewers from Fiji to Turkey in the Asia-Pacific region and beyond. My name is Jose, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us today for this another APO Productivity Talk. And today's topic is public sector talent management. Maybe the question that we would like to raise in this P-Talk is, what is talent? The word talent can be defined as the sum of persons' abilities, such as intrinsic gifts, skills, knowledge, experience, intelligence, judgment, attitude, character, and drive. It also includes someone's ability to learn and grow. In short, it is all about the combination of competence, commitment, and contribution. Meanwhile, talent management can be defined as the systematic attraction, identification, development, engagement, retention, and deployment of those individuals with high potential who are of particular value to an organization. In this session, we will explore the meaning, the applications, and the importance of talent management in the public sector. Joining us today, we would like to welcome Dr. Ora-orn Poocharoen, Director, School of Public Policy, Chiang Mai University, Thailand. Good afternoon, Dr. Ora. Would you like to say something or hello to our viewers?
Yes, good afternoon, Dr. Jose, APO, and respective viewers.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ora. Now we would like to invite Dr. Ora for her presentation, and that will be followed with Q&A later. Dr. Ora, your presentation, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Jose, for having me today to talk about public sector talent management. As we know, the public sector in many countries suffer from trying to recruit the best and the brightest, also to develop those who are already in the sector, and also to retain them and continue to help them feel motivated and improve their work to stay in the public sector. Most public sector loses their best and brightest to the private sector that can actually pay much higher and perhaps have more interesting career prospects. So I think the idea of public management, we really need to focus on our talents, who they are, and what kind of principles we must use to manage all the talents in the public sector. So I like to have my talk in this flow. It will include the key issues that we find in the public sector for talent management. It will include the existing approaches that we could see many governments use. And we'll talk about the dilemmas and the challenges of using these approaches. And I'll also touch upon the factors that we see why some countries practice certain way and some countries practice different ways. And last but not least, the recommendations going forward. I like to also share that the majority of what I will say you can find in my work that has been published called Talent Management in the Public Sector, a comparative study of Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand, which was published in a journal called Public Management Review. And you can see the citations below this PowerPoint. So let me first start off with the key issues for competition for talent in the public sector. I think there are four main issues. The first is the idea that we need to maintain publicness for people working in the public sector. What does that mean? Because the public sector takes in revenue from taxpayers, from fees. It is the bottom line that is more complex than the private sector, who takes in revenues from their earnings, selling their products and services. So the idea that the public sector is working with public resources in recruitment, in development, in retention, in performance reviews of its people, the public sector also needs to be more public about such information. So with that idea of being public, it makes it more difficult to target talent and to have different criteria to manage talent. The second one, which is linked to publicness, is the idea of fairness. Because the public sector in many countries suffers from the problem of not being able to identify the bottom line of organizations, because inherently public sector needs to do many things, and sometimes some goals are conflicting. For instance, we might need to enhance competitiveness of the country, but at the same time we need to reduce inequalities of our country. So these two goals of competing and creating equal societies could produce conflicting outputs and outcomes. Now, we need to have fairness in the public sector because, as I mentioned in the beginning, the public sector, because of the conflicting goals and the complexity of the goals, it's very difficult to say who has done better than whom in each organization and between organizations. So to create this sense of fairness, many governments have actually just used the idea of flat rate. Whoever you are, this is how much you'll be paid, and your pay or your compensation will be increased on an annual basis at a fixed rate based on your seniority, for example, or your age or the time you've been working in the organization. So that is objective, but yet is it fair for those who could do more compared to those who do less? But it's fair in the sense of, if you just measure the number of years people work in the public sector, then it's fair because then you can't have discretion in decisions of fairness for compensation based on age, for instance. So this is just another example of the important issue in the public sector that we need to overcome. And the third is the scarce resources. As we already know, I mean, every organization has limited resources. So one way to look at HR or talent management is to see where we should best invest. And that idea of investing in your people demonstrates the scarce resources. But at the same time, we would go back to that idea of publicness and fairness. If you invest only on certain groups of people and not on everyone, then are we using the scarce resources to enhance equity, for example, in the organization or not? So all this is related issues that is part and parcel of the public sector. And last but not least is the incentives themselves. Those who work in the public sector, we understand that they are supposed to have civic mindedness. They should have public service motivation to want to do things for the public goods and the general public rather than their own private gains and private benefits. However, when we inject the idea of managing talent, we have to work with different sets of incentives. And so those incentives could generate a distorted behavior, or it could also generate positive behavior for the public sector employees to be more productive, for instance. So these are the four key issues of the public sector that we see when we compete for talent. Now, let me share with you from my studies that overall there are two basic approaches to talent management. If you stretch it into two spectrums, it would be the inclusive approach and the exclusive approach. Let me first touch upon the inclusive approach. This approach looks at competitiveness. They have people compete against each other, even within the same organization. And organizations compete to get talent among public sector agencies. But public sector agencies also compete with private sector agencies. And within one country, they could be competing for talent outside the country as well. So that's competitiveness, or to compete as an approach. This approach relies on external market, looking at basically the wages of people in the market and see how much are people being paid and how can we pay more to bring in high talent into our organization. Usually you would see a separate fast track for the exclusive approach, where you pull in people with high potential and high competency to then flourish in the sector. But then because public sector is often very large, then you need to have a separate fast track for them to rise up in their career. Also, they'll have a separate salary scale because to retain the talent, we need to make sure that they are paid, again, comparable to the private sector. So using such high pay scale for everyone doesn't make sense. It has to be limited as an exclusive approach. And then there's aggressive targeting. And this targeting could start from early on, like from high school, for the government to go into different top high schools of the country and to poach students, just as how the private sector would do. This kind of aggressive targeting means you're invited to join the public sector. You are chosen. You're the chosen one. The one view of this exclusive approach is it's a concentrated elite class, of top people. I mean, I've heard governments say, where the leader would say, I only need 200, people to run this country, and they will be the top elites. We don't need many people. So in a way, it could be seen as negative because it's creating a class of elites. But in another way, it could be seen as positive because you're creating a group of talented individuals who have the potential to truly manage the country. So exclusive approach also includes the leadership training of these individuals more than the rest of the public sector employee population. And so the exclusive approach focuses people as HR as a capital to invest in. Okay, that's where it's different from the inclusive approach. Now, with the inclusive approach, this is more developmental. So meaning you see people or HR as vehicle to enhance equity. You allow for everyone to flourish as and when they are ready to flourish. Normally, governments would have in-service employees focus. They would go and target talent from the private sector. They would look at people already in the public sector and help groom them to be the talents. Sometimes governments would use accelerated promotion to incentivize these talents. Maybe some special pay would be provided, but not in a big systems level, and also not comparable to the private sector, but like extra bonuses, for instance. Usually inclusive approach is passive targeting. Again, recruitment would be very open and wide, allowing everyone and anyone to take the entrance exam or come in to compete to get in certain scholarships or certain positions in government. So it's passive targeting, and once people go through sort of the net of selection and they are selected in the end, then they'll be provided other types of training, for instance. We see the inclusive approach as having more diffuse, talented cohort. There isn't a particular group that we can identify that you are the special group of the government, but you could be anyone within the government. So again, the inclusive approach looks at talent as for everyone, and it's a vehicle to enhance equity, all kinds of trainings that we put in, and it's seen almost as a right, as an employee who needs to be developed. So very, very different approaches, these two. Now, let me go on to the three cases that I like to just share briefly. The case of Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. I would say that Singapore is on the exclusive end and Thailand is on the inclusive end, whereas Malaysia is somewhere in between. Now, depending where you are, what country you're from, which government you're working for, you can use this as kind of a framework to see where your countries are situated. I'd like to stress that there is no right, there is no wrong. This just gives you the framework to design the talent management systems that you would like to see in your country. And all three cases presented here have their pros and cons. The exclusive approach also has their pros and cons, and inclusive approach also has their pros and cons. I'll just quickly walk you through this table. You'll see that if we divide talent recruitment, talent development, and talent retention, you'll see that, for instance, Singapore, being an exclusive, taking the exclusive approach, they have pre-service bonded scholarships. They go directly to high schools, scouting, headhunting, talking to teachers of top schools who are the young leaders of the schools. And they actually invite these young people, high schoolers, to come and see the work of government, to come see the offices of government, to really bring them on board early. So that's an exclusive approach. Whereas the inclusive approach in Thailand, for instance, scholarships for high schoolers are open to all. There is no such targeted recruitment, no headhunting. So anyone could apply, provided that you have the qualifications of the high school degree or coming to a high school degree holder. So it's open recruitment for fresh graduates, and this also applies for the bachelor level as well. Whereas in Malaysia, it's kind of mixed. There's the open recruitment for fresh graduates and also mid-career entrants as well. But at the same time, there's also scouting and headhunting as well. So they work sort of in the middle, taking the middle path, of the inclusive and exclusive approaches. For the talent management, for the talent development aspect, we can see that in Singapore, there will be allocated training hours. There will be special high potential schemes for the talents to go through. Whereas in Malaysia and Thailand, as we know that Malaysia is more middle path and Thailand is more inclusive, there's also allocated training hours. However, the tracks that are open for the high talents are pretty open, meaning you could apply, you'll be selected, and you'll get to train, but there might not be anything more than that would help you to go further into the service in a fast way. So that links to talent retention, where in Singapore, being the exclusive approach, the salaries of the talents are pegged to market pay structure. They have performance bonuses, they have performance-based promotions, and the pay structure is very different from the normal civil servants. Whereas in Malaysia, there is some pay for performance as well, and there's also fixed pay increment structure too. Whereas in Thailand, for the inclusive approach, there's actually almost absolutely no special pay structure at all, except for perks in healthcare and pension, and some fast stream track that they could go up faster than others, but it's not guaranteed. It's not done systematically as yet, because Thailand focused much more on the equity and the fairness aspect of human resource management. So these are the three cases that you can look more further into. You can look from your own country where you are. If you're from these three countries, you could see where you'd like to be and how you would like to take these into newer ways of thinking about talent management. So now let me focus, after introducing the different approaches and also the cases, let me discuss a little bit about the factors behind this differing views. I call it competing values in talent management for the public sector. There's 3 points I want to point out. The first is education versus equity-based merit. So for instance, we could see that a place like Thailand, we value the person as is, regardless of what their GPA, their grades in universities were. So you can actually apply to the public sector and be potentially chosen for top leadership in the public sector without having high qualifications or having high scores when you were younger. What does this mean? This means that when the Thai government opens up for any kind of position, there would be sometimes over 100,000 people applying. And then we would have to have examination processes to cater for everyone who's applying. Whereas in Singapore, for instance, because they already value education in the sense of GPA, the grade point average of people, then they can say in their call for application that we would like someone, let's say out of 4, 3.5 or higher, for instance, to apply. That your qualification, you need to have high grades from the beginning. But in Thailand, to have high grades from the beginning, actually the administrative court has ruled that that is unequitable and it's unjust. So all government agencies cannot use that as a basis for selection. So you can see already when we define merit, how do we define merit? Is it based on education? Is it based on equity? Is it based on minority groups, or is it based on the majority race of a country? All of these things play into the competing values that we see, why different governments have different definitions of merit, therefore leading to different definitions and selection process for talent. The second one, obviously, is the inclusive and exclusive approaches that I've already identified for you. And I like to remind us that this inclusivity and exclusivity has a lot to do with the, I call it psychic of the nation. So some countries operate in the market system as a market player, but some countries, the public sector operates like a market corrector, so they don't see themselves as a player in the market to set prices and compete for limited supply and for large demands of things. So inclusive or exclusive for talent management has to go hand in hand with the psychic of that country as well, the overall values that are part of how they operate in general. And the last one is the competency versus performance-based appraisal, and this is where the link between what people have the potential to accomplish versus what they have actually accomplished. So, for example, you can measure a person's a competency, let's say language skills. Oh, this person speaks 3 languages. And you give higher marks to a person with such high competency. However, that person might not have high performance. So speaking 3 languages, so what? They might not be able to truly communicate or use those language skills to achieve the goals of the organization, let's say to help migrant workers in a country, for instance, through the COVID. So competency is one set where you can measure, you can lay out, but the performance itself also needs to be separately managed, lay out, designed, and measured as well. And this is where, for the public sector, again, it's difficult. It's difficult because we need to keep the good talents who have high competency, but at times their performance might not be easily measured because it's in the public sector. So therefore, if we put in KPIs or key performance indicators that are too rigid, then we'll have distortion of behavior as well. So there's a really important balance here that we need to be aware of when we're looking at competency versus performance when we do the appraisals. So let me now share with you in this last 10 minutes about the contextual differences that I see in why countries operate differently, aside from the values that each country operates in. One is the authority of responsible agency. So some countries have public sector sort of HR agency that looks at all kinds of public sector employee, including civil servants, maybe police force, military force, teachers, judges, all kinds of administrators. Whereas some countries, the different types of employees are segregated. So they might look only at the national level, but not at the local level. For instance, they might only look at teachers, but not judges, for instance. So it's very hard to rotate people and develop talent aggregately, integratedly, if the responsible agencies are not working together as a whole of government approach. The second one is the role of public training institutes. Similarly, the role of public training institutes sometimes cover everything from how do you groom early career potential public sector leaders who are in their early career path, to high-ranking officials. How do you create platforms for them to network better and learn faster among each other? But some places really just do one-time off trainings, one program, and that's it. And they don't look at the holistic needs of the talents of the public sector, for instance. So this also is interesting because structurally, if we design the training institutes to play a comprehensive role, then these training institutes could potentially be such great driving force for talent management in the public sector. And then there's the pay structure. Could see that if we want talent, we probably would need a different pay structure to compete with the private sector. And depending on the budget of the country and how you would manage the pay structure, you probably need to consolidate differing structures between different ministries or agencies. This includes those who work in the private companies that are linked with government. There are many government-linked companies that work as private sector that these talents can also work in, and the pay structure would be different. So creating a good system to understand that and have made that public is also important. The fourth is public service motivation. I think here, what's very important is I see a lot of individuals who choose to come into the public sector for only the 10-year contract, for lifetime employment, for the pensions, for the welfare of health, for example. But these aren't the true public service motivation that we're looking for. We're looking for those who want to serve the public, who want to, let's say, protect the environment, who would want to create better public transport for our people, or who would want to be judges who are fair and follow the legalities in a way that society, it makes sense for the society, for instance. So public service motivation is something to also pay attention to when we're looking at talent selection and talent management. And last but not least, of course, is the economy that each country is going through. And I see, of course, in this year, and since last year and the year before, the pandemic has put a toll on the revenues of all governments around the world. And this will definitely have repercussions for how governments can continue to develop their talent. We can discuss about the economy more in the Q&A section after this, but I just wanted to point out that this contextual factor plays an important role in what governments can do or cannot do for their talent. So my last point, and this I'll take about 4 minutes, is that in terms of policy recommendations for governments, I could see that there are 7 points. First is, as mentioned, we need to give the right level of authority to agencies in charge of the scheme. So if we don't give them enough authority, they'll end up doing piecemeal work. And second, we must link across public agencies to develop talent, because those who are talented, they would like challenging jobs. And obviously to be in one ministry for 20 years, that might not be as challenging as moving around to different ministries, so they can see one problem from different points of view. And the third is to link with the private sector to develop talent. I think there's more and more of this need, because the study of policy entrepreneurship, we see that key attributes for those who are able to design innovative policies are usually those who have exposure to the private sector. those who have exposure to overseas education or work. So, working with the private sector to have people move in and out of public and private combined, I think that would be good for most countries. And then the fourth one is we need to overcome fixed pay structures of the bureaucracy. I mean, this has implications for public finance, yes. What we need to do is have sort of flexible floating systems where the government could change the schemes of the pay structures according to the economy, according to performance, according to competencies, and according to the talent that's needed uh, in at the time, right? So, for instance, if now most governments need data analysts, those who can work with big data to do policy analysis, for instance, there's no way government can compete with the bank sector, the finance sector, or the digital companies, the big tech companies, for instance. So you would need like different ways to maneuver the budget so you can attract talent to come to the public sector. And then fifth is the forecast economic cycles to determine demand and supply of human capital. I mean, for instance, right now with the pandemic, we can see that there's large number of unemployment. And where the large number of unemployment, what kind of industry, how can the public sector tap onto those unemployed to then be the talent of the public sector. This is an opportunity, actually, and we need to do these analysis of economic cycles in advance so that we don't overinvest or underinvest when we need to for our talents. And then six, focus on both monetary and non-monetary incentives. So as we already know, the public sector normally has limited, scarce resources, and they need to be accountable to how budgets are used in a public manner. Therefore, we need to be more creative in using non-monetary incentives for those who join the public sector, whether it's titles or whether it's different types of leaves or just the exposure to be able to do things that you normally cannot do if you're in the private sector. And then seventh, last but not least, is develop a functioning performance management system. All kinds of human resource management has to be hand in hand with organization management, and it has to be hand in hand with talent management. So the performance management system itself needs to be solid, adaptable, agile, and at the same time fair and implementable, basically. So those are the 7 recommendations that I have going forward for talent management generally for many countries. So thank you very much. If you'd like for more information, you can contact me with this email.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ora, for a very insightful presentation. And I really like the way you present the topic because you gave us a good example. And these 3 countries are fortunately APO member countries. So other member countries can look into that, as you mentioned, that can look into their current talent management structure. And maybe they can learn also from these countries. And yeah, so I'd like to raise some questions. I hope it's okay with you. And I'd like to go back first to the main discussion on the importance of the topic. And my first question to you is that how important is it to design talent management strategies for the public sector in general?
I think it's very important, just as how we would think about resources in general. The public sector is often seen as wasting resources. So I think that includes wasting the potential of humans who are working in the public sector. We need to manage the talent and bring out the talent so people flourish as best as possible, and at the same time not wasting the salaries that we're paying them, the offices space that they have, and the authority and power that they hold through their public sector titles. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And yeah, I'd like to make follow up on that, and basically in relation to your presentation. But let me just highlight first some important points before we look into in details of your presentation. Is it really possible to manage talent in the public sector given the huge size of its workforce? I think in your paper, you gave kind of data about the size of the workforce in Singapore and Malaysia and Thailand workforce being the biggest one. And maybe other countries also have much bigger workforce. But so my question is that is it really possible to manage the talent? Because if you come into specific agencies or ministries, talent means different kind of talents are required. For example, in the police force, in the judiciary, in the immigration, social services, agriculture. So how do we manage that kind of diversity of required talents and given the size of the workforce of the public sector?
So my answer is yes, it is possible. If you cannot identify who are your A players, top potential people, and who are your average B people who work very well, achieve their goals, and then who are your C people who require more hands-on training or redesigning their job scope to fit them. If you cannot identify your A, B, C players, that means you're not managing your HR at all. So when we say talent management, we're talking about your A players usually. How do we ensure that they continue to stay and flourish in the public sector? So no matter how big your workforce is, you need to be able to identify whether the A people are 1% or 20%, you need to still have some system to locate them, identify them, and work with them so that they continue to deliver their best for our citizens.
Yeah, thank you very much. That also brought me to your paper and your presentation earlier about in those countries that you cited in your paper. You mentioned about the different agencies or institutions involved. So it's not just one civil service agency, but there are, if I recall, two or three or more than that. So maybe that's the reason behind why we have this kind of agencies to look into the workforce and given the size of the workforce in the government or in the public sector. So let me ask this question. This relates to your presentation now. You mentioned about the competing values, and you mentioned about the three kind of models there. But let me just highlight one in this question. Should talent management be more inclusive or exclusive? I think you explained that well, but I'm very curious about it. Or should it be balanced? I think you mentioned that, if I'm not mistaken, like Singapore being more, I would say, exclusive, and Thailand being more inclusive, and Malaysia in between. But should it be balanced, or should we stick to one? Or I don't know. I know you mentioned some other factors, but maybe you could please elaborate on which one, or should it be balanced?
Yes, um, I think I would formulate my answer like this, Dr. Jose, that the inclusive approach is like the bottom layer of a thick cake, you know? You need to have it. You need to have ways to always manage and help improve your B players, your C players, who also contribute tremendously to the public sector. Um, so that has to be in place. And then, if you could imagine a second layer on the cake, a smaller circle, to have also the exclusive approach as well, so that you have succession planning, so that you know who and how to truly invest in certain outstanding individuals. Why I say that is because this sort of top layer exclusive approach that all governments should have, why I say is because at the end of the day, the governments have the responsibility and accountability to govern. So they do need people who are bright, who are fast, who are comprehensive in their thinking, their logic is good, their analytical skill sets are good, so that they can lead, so that they can design policies, so they can come up with solutions that would benefit for the whole society. So that's how I see it, two layered cakes. We need both and not just either or, definitely.
Thank you very much for that answer, because I'm actually thinking whether the issue of being inclusive or exclusive will also determine how does the government being perceived in terms of service delivery or in terms of performance. So I think your explanation is a very good example that we need to look into that kind of modeling, and especially when we talk about the future generation.
Mm,
When we talk about
yes.
inclusiveness and exclusiveness. Okay, so I would like to move on to another question. Again, it relates to your presentation now. And in one of your slides, you mentioned about the contextual factors. And you put, actually, there are five in terms of structure, authority, salary, and economy. There are five actually. So my question here is, if any contextual condition is not functioning well, so what kind
Mm,
of talent do we need to recruit in the public sector? Uh, of course, you mentioned about the authority of the responsible agency, the role of the training institutions, a good pay structure, as you mentioned, motivation to serve the public and the economy. So if any of these factors is not functioning well, how do we address recruitment, or how do we ensure that we have the right people in the public sector?
that's a good question. I think you know, giving authority to responsible agencies, changing the pay structure, or the role of the training institutes and the economy. I think these factors are the ones that, of course, the economy is the most difficult to manage or to take control. Um, but the other three, changing the agencies, the training institutes, and the pay structure, is as difficult. But I think the fourth contextual factor, which is the public service motivation, I think that one should be the one that we focus on, because that one is the one that help us attract those who truly want to be of service, those who are willing to stay up late at night to do COVID testing for our citizens, those who are at the borders checking passports when the immigration lines are long, those people who are sitting in the board in the meeting rooms in different parliament committees to make tough decisions on laws. These are the people we would want in the public sector. So public service motivation is something that we could measure, we could ask people about, we could see their intentions of why they want to join certain organizations and be with the organization. It's about finding their own value, or matching their own life's purpose and values with the organization's goals and mission. I think that is very important, because if we do have a mismatch, then we end up having to like find the talent, groom the talent, pay for the talent, and there's never enough pay for people. Actually, it's always, can I have more, can I have more leaves, can I have more bonuses, can I have this and that. People love to have more materially, but in terms of that sense of purpose, the value of why they get up to come to work every day. Why do they reply that email? Why do they meet with that citizen? Why do they go engage with that partner? All of this has to come back and be synchronized with their own public service motivation and the organization's motivation, and also the citizens' motivation. So if that's aligned, I think talent would be so easily managed, because we don't need to convince people to do their best. Yeah.
Thank you very much for a very inspiring answer, because that also, while you were answering, I was thinking that for if we have that values, for example, the commitment to serve the public, but through time, I don't know how do we sustain because maybe will get affected with how much pay I get in terms of how much experience I have gained in this
Yeah.
service, and of course the training that that will always equip us and prepare us for the job and so forth. And so I
Yeah.
was just
I
wondering,
mean,
how do we
it,
sustain?
yeah, if I could respond, right, Dr. Jose, I think it happens to all of us in all careers, where in the beginning it's so exciting, I'm here to serve. And then along the way, you see all these obstacles and challenges. In the public sector, usually, from what my studies show, that people are faced with red tape, with facing disillusion, right? Of, oh, I thought we would do this, but actually we're doing that. Or I thought that was what our organization stood for, but actually this politician has come in, or the government has changed, or the policy has changed. So we're doing things differently. Or I had an image of this organization, but when I came in, it's not meeting my expectations. But the idea of having the red tape, idea of having your ideas slapped down, of, oh, you're talented, you're great, but don't talk too much in this meeting because we have other interests to manage, and so on. I think these are the little things that accumulate to then add to a person's sense of purpose to not achieve it. And it could also lead to burnout because you're doing so many things and you get lost on why you're doing it, right? So as an organization, I think it's so important to track the talent and to have, at differing points in their career, to interject interventions to ensure all these well-known problems such as burnout to be mitigated, and to revive people's sense of achievement and well-being once again. I think it's so important. So in their 20s, in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and now we're seeing 70s coming back to work in the public sector, to be advisors, to sit in committees and so on. But how do you then ensure, right, that all of them function their best with good well-being for the organization? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. So that's a challenge to all of us in the public service. So
Yes.
we should keep the fire of commitment, sustained throughout the years of our service in the government or in the public sector. We
Mhm.
believe that, yeah, as you explained, yeah, maybe at the early stage when you are young, we look at ourselves, very high with commitment, but through the years, the other environmental factors may change. But I like the way you explain that, we need to, continually live with those values so that, our
Mhm.
commitment will be there. And I have another question. I think again, this relates to what we are discussing now about performance, and I think you mentioned that also in your slides. Uh, how do you view the relationship between talent management and government performance? What I'm trying to say is, when when we have the right people or the right workforce, does it mean in the government or in the public sector? Does it mean that uh, government performance is excellent or something very good? So I mean, in your study, how did you find out, or what are your findings? Is there any relationship between the two in terms of talent management and government performance?
Definitely, there's a very close relationship. The first relationship is uh, good talent. Good teams will produce good work, and that good work, what it is the government's performance. Whether you're supposed to be drafting the next social protection law, or you're supposed to be implementing the economic subsidies for those unemployed due to the pandemic. All these are government performances that citizens see, and so government's work is conducted by people. And if those people, have no talent, then it would severely affect the government performance. The second part of the relationship that I like to point out is people as individuals, I believe, choose to work with organizations, public, private, or nonprofit, not because they are public, private, or nonprofit, but because the organization fits with them. And most people, I would say, would rather work in a well functioning organization than a chaotic one full of nepotism, or one that's dysfunctional or with a lot of toxicity. So when people choose government agencies to be their top preference for employer, I think that is a great indicator that the government is functioning well. So it's vice versa, right? Good talent helps good performance. Good performance attracts good talent as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to connect that answer about good performance of the government. Recently, or not just recently, but in recent years, I would say that reskilling, upskilling, training, those buzzwords catch up with the fast-changing work environment. So everyone is, into that kind of upskilling or reskilling or training. So how
Yes.
do we apply this in the public sector? This kind of, I believe I understand that maybe private sector can easily upskill, reskill, train their own staff. But what about for the public sector? Earlier I mentioned about it's a huge workforce. So how do we address the reskilling, upskilling, or training of this huge workforce in the public sector?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. More and more, I'm looking at this from the approach of lifelong learning. How do we ensure that every individual has the mindset of growth psychology, of growth mindset, that there's some things you do well, but there are many things that you would want to learn and do better. So how do we have people have the growth mindset and have an ecosystem that allows them to continuously grow in a pace that they're comfortable? So this is lifelong learning. It's different from the approach of, okay, 70% of our workforce needs to know how to use PowerPoint. Let's give them training on PowerPoint, or the digital online meetings. How do you manage Zoom? Things like that. That I don't consider that effective ways of looking
Maybe
at reskilling or upskilling, but rather lifelong learning. How do you inject that into an organization? How do you celebrate the enhancement of growth mindset? I think that's important because that will then lead to people wanting to invest in themselves and asking the right questions of where the organization is investing in them. So it comes back to the idea of the appraisal system, that should not never be just top down. It should be giving feedback, constructive, yes, but the person themselves needs to also feel very comfortable to, you know, look and observe themselves of where they are and where they want to go, and take that ownership of what skills do they want and how they will invest their time each year to upskill and reskill themselves. And that again comes with growth mindset. So if we're going to invest, I think let's invest in growth mindset training first.
Yeah, I agree with you that it's not just because something it's an in. I think the idea of reskilling, upskilling, I think it's simply because the effect of digital technology or the
Mm.
revolution, of this digital technology, especially in the face of COVID-19. Suddenly, we are faced to learn about how to operate digital technology so that we can continue our services and something like that. So, and yeah, I believe that learning should be, in general, should be a lifelong learning, not just because we are forced to do so. Of course, the situation compelled us, forced us to learn, because that's one way how to improve ourselves. So,
Yes.
I have a question. You mentioned about COVID-19 in your
Mm.
explanation earlier. So I want to know your views. So what have been the overall effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on talent management in the public sector, if there's any?
Okay. So that's a great question. I think many governments are still at the stage of trying to understand what the impact is on the talent of the public sector. I think in general, we see the trend that public sector employees have found this wonderful work from home system, something that in many countries are unheard of. The digitalization of processes has rapidly accelerated, obviously. So again, we find that, oh, we're sitting in meetings with people without the need to travel. And all of this, I think, has implications for public sector employees in general, um, whether it's about systems regarding their welfare. For instance, in Thailand, if you come into the office, you can bill for overtime, OT. But if you work at home, you can't, for instance. So these are seemingly minor issues, but actually has huge implications for talent management, for motivation of public sector employees. Um, so in general, we see these small issues everywhere. Um, Reimbursements for attending meetings as well used to be physical, you have to sign, but now in Thailand, they've allowed for online meeting, you can be reimbursed to, things like that. But okay, that's the overall. But for talent management, what I think is going to happen is two possibilities. One is because of the high unemployment rate in the private sector, we're going to see much larger pool of people wanting to join the public sector. So the public sector has an advantage of selecting talent from the private sector, especially like hospitality industry, for instance. That's one, which is positive for the public sector. But the second is we might see flowing out of highly talented individuals who choose to do contract work rather than be binded by an organization. Because now people realize, oh, I can just do this contract, that contract. I can work for any organization I want. I have my free time. I can work from home. I can do remote working. I can be on the beach. I can get same salary or even higher salary from my previous public sector job. So we might see an outflow of talent, which is in parallel with the surveys that I've seen on people now choosing to quit their jobs since the pandemic because they realize there's more to life, than serving one organization. Also, with the pandemic, it makes most of us rethink what are we doing? Why do we live?
Yeah,
And who
true.
are most important in our lives? So I think these two plausible scenarios are worth looking closely into and see how each government would take advantage or fill in the gaps of any cons that might happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. And since the pandemic, the effect is still ongoing, so I think we are still learning, and maybe that will also give some kind of implication later on the
Yeah.
talent management in the public sector. As you mentioned, there are now in the past we think that it's employees market. I mean, they choose which they want to go or the kind of organization they want to work with. But with
Yes.
losses, for example, so there is a pool of talented people out there waiting to be employed. So I
Yeah.
have a few more questions, Dr. Or. I hope it's fine with you.
Of
So far,
course.
we have been talking about the, I would say, very good aspect of talent management in the public sector. But let me ask this question. Are there any signs of poor talent management in a public sector organization, or have you encountered, or how do we address when we encounter this poor talent management in the public sector?
I think poor talent management equals to no management. you know, when you leave the people just be, and then people just age into the system and their salary just increases incrementally every year, I think that's considered no management of talent, whether it's inclusive or exclusive. So I think that is seen in many public sector organizations, not just in Asia, but many places, that people are just left to be, you know. So the signs of that is eminent, right? We can see poor quality services, people not having solutions, organizations not having solutions. You don't see any innovations coming out. I think it's very clear. And some organizations, if they do manage and they manage poorly, which means, for example, there's nepotism, there's unfair or non-transparent ways of performance appraisals, where there are, again, friends and foes that kind of toxicity in public sector organization. You can almost see very clearly that people leave, that they're not the ones who win the quality awards of any types or have any, cases of productivity champions or anything like that. So yeah, I think there are signs of such organizations in every country.
Yeah, I like your explanation, especially when you relate a good talent, or a well-managed talent in organization, in a public sector organization, that correlates with productivity because that's our work, and that's where we are trying to help and support the public sector in the region, at least,
Yeah.
in believing that helping them, supporting them with a good talent management approach can improve the productivity of individual or organization or even the public sector in general. So,
Mm.
Dr. Ora, I would like to have maybe one last question, if it's okay with you. This year, for the last 2 years, we all understand the current situation about the importance of being resilient and being able to overcome the challenges of COVID-19. And for the APO this year, actually, we look at the situation, or we look at this year, and hopefully in the years to come, that we'll be able to regrow and rebound, in these
Mm.
difficult times. So, relating this to our topic today, so how can better talent management in the public sector regrow and rebound now and in the near future?
Yes. So just as how we would prioritize our attention, our energy, our resources, I think it's very important to systematically prioritize those working in the public sector to see who needs which kinds of talent management system. How much are we willing to invest? What are the outputs and outcomes that we are looking for? And just as how we would like every society to take care of our people as best as we can, I think the public sector and those who are talented in the public sector also needs to be given importance, because as we can see in times of crises such as the pandemic, it's the public sector that needs to be able to still stand, so that we can continue to be of service to others, to help rebuild the economy, to help rebuild our environments, to be more sustainable in all ways. Um, yeah, so we need to put our energies into the talent management systems of our public sector for sure.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ora, for very insightful presentation and very encouraging and very hopeful discussion. And I completely agree with you that in this difficult time, I think a good talent management is very important, in helping all organizations, not just limited to the public sector, overcome and be able to rebound and regrow in the
Mhm.
years ahead. So, to our dear viewers, I hope that Dr. Ora's presentation gave us a clear understanding that putting the right people uh, in the public sector organization is not very easy. I think we have heard in her answers to our questions and even her presentations and even the cases she shared in Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. The diversity of services offered by the public sector, we cited example earlier, agricultural services, social services, financial, health, education, global affairs, security, and many others, make it extremely more complex to manage talent. Basically, we talk about a huge workforce in the public sector. So the question of how important is to have the right people in the position is difficult to answer, if I may uh, give my own opinion. If you do not like your cars, for example, the services of the restaurants, the supermarket, the clothing, or the food, you can shop around and look for a replacement. But obviously,
Mm.
there is no alternative to the National Food Safety Agency, who serve the public, to the
Yeah.
community police force, who enforce security in the community, state financing institutions, the diplomatic corps, or other public services to make sure that citizens are satisfied with public services and receive the best quality. So Dr. Ora shared very valuable insights on the importance of talent management in the public sector to ensure that people are matched to the right jobs for the skills, competencies, and career plans for better services to the citizens. This is especially necessary when things are changing quickly, brought about by advances of technologies that fundamentally change the way public sector operate nowadays. So we sincerely thank Dr. Ora for those insights, and I would like to ask her for her final message.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Jose, for having me today to share my thoughts about talent management in the public sector. I wish the audience a great success. I hope you have learned some things, and if you have things to share with APO and also as cases that could be very useful for other governments, please feel free to share as well. I'm here to learn too. Also, unfinished talent. But all the best to everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ora, and we also thank our viewers and hope that this P-Talk will contribute to efforts to improve public sector talent management for higher productivity, specific to the national context. So we would like to invite our viewers to please stay tuned to our next P-Talk session, and goodbye for now. And Dr. Ora, once again, thank you very much for joining us in this P-Talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And please stay safe and healthy in Chiang Mai.
Yes, same to everyone as well.